Matching colors in interior design involves selecting a color scheme that combines with the overall aesthetic and the design rules. In the previous lesson, we talked about the fact that we cannot use any color in interior. Of course, there are interiors that do use almost any color. They look great in advertising and images that we see on internet. But when it comes to real interior design, most people stick to more safe color palettes. Home, it's not a club, although clubs do belong to interior design. So here's the question, how do we get to that safe colors? First of all, we have to talk about 4 things. We have to talk about hues, tints, tones and shades. And as interior designers, we must understand how we link them to 3ds Max and how do we apply them in our projects. Let's start with the hues. Before we start mixing colors, we will start with the hues as they are some kind of clean middle colors. They are for us like a starting point. Keep in mind that we usually do not use clean colors in interiors. First of all, they are just too intensive. Second, they are not so interesting for interior design. Advertising, yes. Interior design, no. Remember the classic interior from the previous lesson? At university, we were forbidden to use clean colors for our paintings. So one more time, they are just like the starting point before we mix colors and obtain a more complicated colors that suits the palette of an interior design project. I will get to Max and I will create a new material so we can see how hues apply and perform in 3ds Max. First of all, we have to mention that we can create a color in 3ds Max and not only in Photoshop. It's the same thing, using a few methods. We can pick the color simply from the color palette. We can use RGB code, or we can use hue, saturation and value. In this lesson, we will focus on hues. So hues refers to the attribute of the color that distinguishes one color from another, based on its position on the color spectrum or color wheel. So simply we can say that this is red, this is orange, this is blue, this is green. So all these are like clean middle points from where our color mixing starts. In 3ds Max they are represented like a ribbon. This is like a straightened color wheel. And if we get to color palette, you can see the hues up here. They are the most high colors in the palette as they are clean and they are not mixed. The concept of hue is closely related to the wavelength of light. Different wavelengths of light correspond to different colors, and when combined with varying amounts, they create different hues. The hue of a color is determined by a dominant wavelength of light it reflects or emits. So we can say, in other words, that we have a dominant color. In interior design, this is like the main color that will give the tone or set the gamma of our interior. We will talk about the color ratios in the next lessons. They are called also dominant colors in interiors. They usually form the palette that we will use in our interior, and also depending on what rules we apply for our interior project. And one more time, we will get back to our interior palettes. We can use any hue for our interior as a dominant color, and we can create a correct color palette from a color theory point of view. And all these start with the hues. But usually when people start a real interior project, they stick to a safe color palette. And by safe, I mean visually safe home palettes. Before we get here, we have to talk about the other 3 factors, so in the next lesson we will talk about tints.